It is a wonderful thing and a strengthening of faith that souls differing from each other in place, nationality, language, obedience, and age should have been thus led into a delightful friendship. This is Pints with Jack, Season 7, Episode 40, Season Finale. Dear Pints with Jack listeners, thank you for downloading this episode of Pints with Jack, the podcast where we discuss the work of C.S. Lewis. This season, we hosted a free viewing party for the movie Surprise by Oxford. We hosted the very first ever C.S. Lewis Reading Day. We read several collections of Lewis's correspondence, Letters to an American Lady, Letters to Children, and the Latin letters of C.S. Lewis, the last of which was the source for today's opening quotation. We brought the book, Letters from Jack, back into print, and we sent it out to all of our upper-tier supporters and sold it to whoever wanted to purchase it at cost. We explored Jack's bookshelf again, looking at how figures like Plato, Boethius, and Charles Williams influenced C.S. Lewis's life and thought. We completed the final Narnian Chronicle, The Last Battle, and we explored the life and writings of C.S. Lewis's master, George MacDonald. But we have now come to the end of Season 7. We hope you enjoyed it. All blessings, Andrew, David, and Matt. Gentlemen, it has been a while since we've had a catch-up. How are you both doing?
I mean, in all honesty, we haven't done Common Runes either. When was the last time we recorded? Was it with Kristen for the last battle?
It's too long ago.
Yeah, I think so. 2 months.
Listeners, we were just chatting about, I was saying, hey, I miss my buddies.
Yeah.
This has been a great excuse to hang out with friends that I really care for. And so when we haven't been doing the business of the podcast, I found that I miss my friends. And I think that's a really good sign.
There's another benefit too. It's all a blessing. There's a small curse to it, but it's all a blessing. It forces a rhythm of engaging in spiritual works. And there's a temptation in life when things get busy to sacrifice spiritual practices. I fall into that as much as any other human does. But this, we have to show up. I mean, we have to do the readings. We've got to underline them, engage them, and talk about them. And so it's like there's a minimum cadence that I miss of engaging in theological, spiritual conversations, asking myself how this applies to my own journey. And so I have missed that the last couple months for sure. So anyways, I'm doing well. I've had some massive life updates. I think many of them were kind of known in the process, obviously, but I've officially moved to Old Town Alexandria, Virginia. And I have to say, it is a close competitor to San Diego because it's one of those cities like San Diego where the airport is really accessible to the city, which is a weird plus. You can live outside the city, but get to the city really easily. You know, Chicago, New York, if you live outside, it's a nightmare to get in. To benefit Old Town, it's like super walkable. So I just walk everywhere. And King Street is 10 blocks from us. We just walk there for dinner and do a date night. And it's so lovely. And I moved into the same apartment building that my fiance's in. And so we're able to kind of sort of do life together a little bit. We don't live together, but I'm 2 floors apart from her. And so that just makes it really lovely as well. So yeah, wedding planning is going well. Honeymoon is pretty much all planned. And I just got back from Oxford on Monday. This is a Friday. For a wedding I was standing in for an Oxford buddy. It was a quick trip in Friday, out Monday, but I did stay at the Eastgate Hotel, which they confirmed was the Eastgate.
Renovated, but still.
Yes. I went to the Lamb and the Flag.
Oh, it's open again.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I went to Addison's Walk again, Magdalen College, stopped and looked at Eagle and Child, which had the windows broken into. It's kind of getting destroyed. But anyways, it was lovely.
That's so cool. Marie and I, we were just watching Howard's End, the older version with the guy that played C.S. Lewis, Sir Anthony Hopkins. And in that, there's some scenes from Oxford, and you see them starting a walk on Addison's Walk.
Wow.
I got very excited.
Well, I forgot to say, too, when I was there, I read a third of Paralandra.
Dang.
Because I was reading, but I read a whole other book. So in fairness, I did finish something. Mystical Paralandra. I was trying to read them both, but I just ended up enjoying a nap at Christ Meadows for like 2 hours on Sunday.
Christchurch Meadows.
Christchurch Meadows. So.
Oh.
didn't end up reading as much. But anyways, the Mystical Paralandra just got me stoked for Paralandra. And I'm just diving into it now. I'm hoping to finish it all this week. So then when I'm going through it, it'll be a second time through.
By the way, Matt, you anticipated an essay that you won't be reading for several years, I imagine. But in Selected Literary Essays, an address to, I think, the British Academy, Lewis writes an essay called Hamlet, the Prince, or the Poem. And he talks about Hamlet criticism and says, something to the effect of, when I read Hamlet criticism, it makes me want to drop the criticism and go back and page through Hamlet itself. And so, although you haven't probably read that essay, it's a good one. And that's what you were doing. Did you go to see the Maudlin exhibit on Lewis?
No.
Oh, man. And I wish I had tasked you to buy a copy of Lewis's Oxford by our friend Simon Horrobin.
Well, Matt, our Patreon supporter and friend of the podcast and friend myself, gave me a first edition Great Divorce.
Oh, wow.
Which was lovely. And then he walked into a bookshop and got, I want to say it was a first edition Abolition of Man and an Oxfam one maybe for €6 or pound, and we saw online they go for like 25 or something.
Oh, sure.
So he was pretty stoked.
Nice. Well, here's my flex. There are these Narnia solo games, and there are actually 5 of them, but they came in a box set of 4. The 5th one only had a couple of editions of it, and then so it's ridiculous $200-300. But even this box set sells for a couple $100, and I got it for cheap. But here are these Narnia solo games.
Are they like choose your own adventure?
Exactly.
Okay.
And it was done in '88 by the Episcopal Radio and TV Foundation, the same group that produced The Four Loves. And I don't even know that the books have been taken out, so I'm not going to, but there's my flex.
We did go real quick to that Blackwell's Rare Bookshop on top of there, like the 3rd floor, and they've got like first edition Tolkien stuff that's 20,000 pounds for the 3 books and stuff. We looked at all of that stuff. There's some Pauline Baines stuff there.
Yeah. I like how they have a lot of the Lewis and Tolkien stuff under local interest in that bookshop. For myself, we had a great C.S. Lewis conference. It went about as well as it could have gone. Kristen had been praying for 50 people and 8 children, and we had 57 people and 8 children. And that included my bishop, Justin Holcomb, who came just to attend. And that was great support. And he got to see me do my Lewis thing. And so I hope that has some benefits in the future. His daughter, 15-year-old daughter, presented an academic paper. It was her first. And he stayed for the whole conference. And when I said, well, maybe we'll do it again next year, he actually said, there's no maybe about it. He paid for his staff to come. They did an article with me and Kristen, an interview and pictures and stuff. And then they published the article as Church of the Messiah hosts the diocese's first annual C.S. Lewis conference. So we already have dates, listeners, May 2nd and 3rd, Friday and Saturday, Friday evening, afternoon, evening, and all day Saturday. And the conference will be called Mere Christians Surprised by Love. And we'll look at Lewis's second best book, Great Divorce, Surprised by Joy, and Till We Have Faces, and look at how all of our stories are the stories of love. We're lining up guests, and it just went great. Kristen and I have a number of speaking events coming up. We're doing a retreat for the C.S. Lewis Institute in Atlanta, Georgia. We did some online stuff for them, got some things lined up in September. My paper was accepted for the Undiscovered Lewis Conference, my paper on early prose joy, and so I'll be doing that. I proposed a second paper about Joy Davidman, and they said, well, if there's space, we'll allow it, but there probably won't be. So yeah, just clicking along and, starting to pray about where I might end up next. I've got a little bit more than a year left in my residency, and then I'll have to be in a different position. So there'll be changes by a year from now, probably.
And I really like what you've chosen for your next conference, because you'll be having it just before we start season 9, which is when we'll be doing Surprised by Joy.
Excellent. Well, maybe we can get Pints with Jack to sponsor it again, and maybe do some on location stuff. Or we can, now that I've got a year to plan, not 2 months to plan, we'll do a lot more of that. And so we will be looking for sponsors. Hopefully we'll be able to bring in some different guests. I've got my eyes on Diana Glyer, but that's always a challenge. But anyway, it went about as well as it could have gone. I think. Thank all for their support and their likes on Facebook, and thanks to Pints with Jack for sponsoring Matt Wheeler. It was a fantastic time.
Mm. He actually came on one of our video chats last week.
Yeah,
it was just a virtual coffee morning, just because we hadn't done any virtual events in a while. And so he came on and he played the Pints with Jack song, which everyone else isn't going to hear until next season.
Oh, okay. Good. Well, and we want to get him on. So
yes,
we'll work on that.
Well, for me, life has been exceptionally busy. I mentioned before I got a Battlefield promotion, so I took over a project that my boss had been working on. He got fired, so I took over it, and we've been a mad rush to get everything back on track and clear up some earlier choices that weren't quite so great.
It's a really good sign, by the way, when your boss gets fired and you get put into the job. You're doing something right.
Yeah, something. My wife's family continues to grow. 2 new babies since we last spoke, and naturally two more baptisms and 2 more parties to go to, which have been a lot of fun. And I've been planning for travels later this year. Oregon for the Undiscovered C.S. Lewis Conference, DC for Matt's wedding, and Ireland and England for a family vacation.
Oh, nice. Good.
So with that, what's everyone drinking today? I'm trying to like Irish whiskey more, so I am drinking Teeling whiskey, small batch.
I enjoy Bushmills, man. It's pretty good.
I like Bushmills and Black Bush.
All good things have Bush in them.
I think that, David, you should probably like Jamesons, because I think Jamesons are what the Catholics drink, and Bushmills is what the Protestants drink. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So
I just generally find Irish whiskey to be a little bit more aggressive, and I'm more or less of a fan of that.
There's a gluten-free whiskey, and it's quite lovely. It's called Redbreast. And
I've had that.
Yeah, very nice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I am two-fisted drinking today. Too bad we don't have Pints with Jack Steins, but I'm drinking some Old Speckled Hen in a stein. Can't you see how gorgeous and malty that looks? Yay.
Lovely.
And then I've got a dram of my Lafroig Cargis from our Patreon supporter, Bud, and I've got it in my Pints with Jack dram. So, yes, so we're going to kick off quite a Friday evening here after I've had a couple of drinks.
I am drinking... I've been out of big just for the last 45 days, very minimal to no alcohol. So you just feel so good. So I'm drinking a non-alcoholic Blue Moon.
All right.
I found out that Total Wine in Orlando has Old Speckled Hen, and they have non-alcoholic Guinness. And if you get the coupon right, you get free delivery. And so that's why I have Old Speckled Hen, and I do have some non-alcoholic Guinness. Well, we've got some toasts, including a friend of mine.
Yes. So we're going to do all of these toasts individually throughout the season. Don't panic. Next season, because we're still in the previous season. Doesn't feel like that.
It's the current season.
Yeah, you're right. I'm way off. You'd think I've been drinking a lot today already. All right. So our Patreon supporters, this is going to go out to Kathy Perrine, Sarah McHale, Mark Adams, Scott Thompson, Mary Kay.
I'm sorry, Mary Kay who?
Mary Kay Predmore.
Cheers! That's my friend.
And Kevin Morgan and Edgar Toscano. So first of all, thank you to all of our new Patreon listeners. And we just raise this glass to you as we enter this new season. May the season of life that you are entering going forward be filled with as many blessings that hopefully we encounter on our journey to Paralandra. Cheers.
Cheers.
Jumping the gun a bit, but cheers.
Yeah, I keep thinking this feels like the beginning of season 8, not the end of season 7. You know what? So Guinness Zero tastes like Guinness. It's remarkably how well they've done. Blue Moon just tastes like an orange citrusy drink.
Okay.
It's not like the beer. It's not bad, but...
Well, as outlined in the introduction, we've done a huge amount this season. Movie party, reading day, letter collections, Jack's bookshelf, finished Narnia, explored George MacDonald, and we brought a book back into print. So I just want to turn it over to you guys. Any thoughts you want to share about season 7?
Well, I when I read this, I thought to myself, rather than going back and doing research on what we talked about in season 7.
Research, or as everyone else calls it, just remembering what you yourself have done. Carry on.
Well, that's actually what I ended up approaching this. I was like, what still sticks out with me? Because that's kind of telling that was something that was quite impactful. And so anyways, I would say, first of all, the letters between St. Don Giovanni Calabria and Lewis, it really stuck out. I thought the beauty, the reverence, the devotion to Christ, the crucified Christ, it was very Christ-centric, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciated that. That was very touching and inspiring. I'm glad we did that. I would also say the offering up that continued to come up in various letters, not just the St. Don Giovanni ones. I thought that was just really profound insights and something to keep always in the forefront of your mind in a state of struggle. Those are opportunities for offering up. And I would also just say the emphasis on obedience really still sticks with me. So crucified Christ, offering up, obedience, devotion. I mean, I think all of that were just really beautiful themes that came out through it. I would say I really enjoyed my interviews. David is very gracious, lets us choose them ahead of time. So, you kind of actively select ones you think you're going to like. And thankfully, I really loved all of mine. I really did enjoy, because of particularly Dr. Louis Marcos, not like
Lewis.
I enjoyed that.
Lewis Marcos.
Not that I enjoyed that better than other ones, but like the topic itself, I've been very intrigued with the idea of Plato. I've had people ask me about it and I just know nothing about it because classically I've not read Plato. So it was cool just to have someone spoon feed me some Platonic connections to Lewis. And then I would just say the last battle was incredible. It was just super moving. So as I reflect on that, that was just a highlight for me. And I'm very excited now to be able to just read all of them straight. And I actually might do that with Mary Margaret here before our wedding, or potentially on our honeymoon. Would be kind of fun to bring one or two of them since we'll have some lazy days. So I'm excited.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we've developed quite a body of work. I've got a couple of parishioners in addition to Mary Kay Predmore. Got another parishioner who comes up and says, "Oh, I just was listening to this and that," and so it's just been a joy for me to be part of this Mary band and to be part of creating, I think, a really significant body of work. And when you go over, David, what we did this year, I mean, I think we need to cheers you. I mean, here's to the founder of our feast. I mean, he's done such tremendous work here. I'm going to clink my glasses together.
Cheers.
To Batesian rigidity.
Cheers.
To Batesian rigidity. I forgot about that one.
Batesian generosity, let's call it that.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Andrew.
By the way, Matt, reading Lewis on your honeymoon is an important tradition. I read Out of the Silent Planet on mine.
Ooh.
Andrew, did you read any?
Did I read any Lewis on my honeymoon? No, I just stayed in his house.
That's a good one.
So, not bad silver medal. Well done.
Yeah. So I'm sure we did. We went to England for the Lewis conference and we traveled all over the place. I did read some Wordsworth on my honeymoon as well. And I cooked in Jack's kitchen during my honeymoon. Well, this season, I love always the chance to look at letters. Listeners, grab a collection of letters, any kind that you can get your hands on. You can get cheap paperbacks and just open them anywhere and start reading. Such a great, inspiring group of thoughts. In fact, Kristen closed the conference. The very last thing that she read was one of the last letters to children. If you love Jesus, nothing much can go wrong with you, and I pray that you will always do so. Mm-hmm. Really loved collaborating with our podcasters, our fellow podcasters. Grateful for the invitations that I've had, and I look forward to more. It was so great to expand that community. And I think I mentioned on our last episode or something, Patty Callahan had a fly-in date into Orlando, and we were able to break away and have lunch with her. She was very gracious to treat us at a lovely hotel. It was the first time we'd seen each other since we had Pavlovas at the Randolph Hotel in Oxford, right across from the museum there.
I have to say, it is pretty cool to see the Lewis podcast is growing, expanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's one in Northern Ireland that's going to be starting in a couple of months.
Yeah, I saw that. I hope that we get invited. I just heard the promo for that. But when we were having lunch, I mentioned Lewis Reading Day, and I said, it was excessively male.
Anywhere I am is excessively male, Andrew.
Well,
you're a jokester.
Sure. We'll go with that. But I mentioned that to her, and she said, "Count me in. I'm in November 29th. Got it on my calendar." And so she is our first invited and confirmed guest for for C.S. Lewis Reading Day next year. So just a great circle of friends, lots of golden sessions sponsored by this podcast and all the people that Lewis brings together.
One last thing I'll say there is we need to, if there's a listener that has a love for TikTok, I feel like we've done a good job trying to bring Lewis to like the millennial generation. I mean, we have a lot of non-millennials too, but podcasts started very much. That was like our thing. Our generation was podcasts. It's now obviously expanded beyond that as the medium of content consumption, except the 18 to 22 years. How do we get Lewis to them? They don't consume podcasts. If someone can like take our content, we'll use all you want for free and build like TikTok videos or something. I don't know. There needs to be a Lewis TikTok person.
Yeah. Well, and the three of us just got an opportunity this last week. And I think that doing some reels for that outlet might be, I like the reels that we've done. And I think that may be a good outlet. So yes, to all of our listeners and to those of our listeners who have teenage offspring or preteen offspring, maybe Brittany White can steer us as well as a number of others. So
for me, this season, C.S. Lewis Reading Day was really important. It was a huge amount of work getting everything going, but it feels really good to have established it, and I think it'll be much easier in future years because we've now got everyone on the mailing list. Everyone knows roughly what happens now, because before I had to keep on explaining what this was and what was going to happen.
And incidentally, David and Crystal Downing, who promised to be the directors of the Wade Center for 5 years and stayed for 6 or 7 because of the pandemic, they have retired, and there's a new director at the Wade Center. And so I may reach out to him on behalf of Lewis Reading Day and see if we can bring them along. He and Kristen and I are going to have lunch together in late September when I go back to the Wade, and we may be doing something with the Lewis Institute. So let's hope that Reading Day expands.
I'm actually also going to be back in Chicago in September. Let's get out our calendars later and see if this coincides.
Last week.
I think I'm mid, but we'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Okay.
You guys should both let us know though, because Mary Margaret and I, her family lives there, so we'll be planning trips back every once in a while to visit family. So can always coordinate.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, let's see if we can do that. I mean, a live in-person event at the Wade Center would probably be not a bad idea.
That'd be cool.
21st through the 28th of September.
There might be some overlap. We might be able to make this happen.
That's a Saturday to a Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
So Lord bless our plans and prosper them.
Well, also this season, I got to endorse a couple of books. I gave an endorsement to Re-Enchanted, which is a book of poetry by Rob Jones. And I also endorsed Once a Queen by Sarah Arthur. And I was invited to the launch party to judge an English accent competition, which was a lot of fun.
Lovely.
I whipped mine out completely, and the groomsmen couldn't stand me. I was just mimicking every phrase they said, trying to do an English accent. It was painfully cringeworthy, but I loved every minute of it.
I suspect it wasn't just the accent.
It really wasn't. I had no shame.
Matt, you mentioned a couple of your favorite interviews. I thought you had 2 absolutely platinum level interviews this season. The one with Dr. Joe Rigney and Will Voss. I thought both of those were superb. They're definitely among my favorites from this season. But I, of course, have to choose a couple of my own as well. Obviously, the Diana Glyer interview, because Diana Glyer, but also the Northrop Frye interview with Angelina Stanford. Mm-hmm. And I saw on their podcast Facebook group, Kay Pelham wrote, "Y'all, this is so good. Angelina lays out the history of literary criticism prior to Lewis, then Lewis and Tolkien and their work at Oxford, Lewis at Cambridge, how Frye crossed paths physically and philosophically, and she names the bad guys and the bad criticism too. This is the knowledge she gives in class, and with her usual wit and energy, don't miss this, more $1 million teaching for free." So
fantastic.
I would just like to say, if you have not listened to the Northrop Frye interview, I think it's well worth your time. Absolute gold. Really, really was.
I'm going to throw this out into the universe. I feel like somehow, maybe if there's someone that is like an app developer and wants to volunteer to create a Pints with Jack app for free. For a ministry.
So season finale / and Matt implores all kinds of help.
Well, here's what I'm saying. Like, I appreciate this comment because not to do to our own doing, but we have so many wonderful guests. Like the content that's in our backlog is just incredible. But a podcast feed is just a long feed. I mean, it's unfortunate that it kind of gets it's just not, there's only so much you can do to organize it. The website is obviously, David's done wonderful work with that. There's like a way where someone could just, almost like the Hallow app where you've got all these things in tiles and different sections people can go through and like pull up different ones. Like there's just so much rich content that David had sourced from these brilliant scholars, but it's just sitting there. And I just think there's a way to capture it more, but David's already completely tapped out. I just don't have the capabilities to build something like that. But maybe someone just really is an expert at it and they want to.
Well, there you go.
Do with that what you will, guys.
As long as we're throwing things out, and I know we need to hasten along. But I was chatting with the bishop and mentioning Freud's Last Session. The movie has come out. And when it was a play in Houston, I was invited along with a professor of psychology to speak to the audience after the play about Lewis and Freud. And so we are planning in the Diocese of Central Florida in Orlando, maybe at the cathedral, to do a screening of the movie and then do a similar thing. I'll respond on the Lewis side, and we'll get somebody to respond on the psychology side. And so it's ever generative. So tell us about McDonald, though, David.
Just my final note to say that after this season and McDonald month, I've developed a real liking for him. So expect to see more McDonald in the seasons going forward.
Mary Margaret just read Fantasties and said she absolutely loves it. And so now I have to read it clearly.
Absolutely. Maybe ease yourself in. Listen to the free audiobook of The Golden Key that we put on Patreon first.
Oh, fantastic. Read by
Abigail Rena.
Okay.
So that's what we thought of Season 7. So let's just read a few thoughts from listeners on what they thought of Season 7 in the form of iTunes reviews. I picked out one for each of us. Deadhead76 wrote, "My very favorite C.S. Lewis podcast." Well, there are many to choose from, so thank you very much. David, Matt, and Andrew are intelligent and articulate and always interesting and funny. Yeah, I think out of all of that, I can definitely say I think we're always funny.
Well, you guys can be funny. I'll be intelligent and articulate. And humble.
Let's hear that now as you read the next one. No mistakes.
Oh, great. We also have a long expected review. I started listening to the show, says one listener, back in season 2, and I've been really impressed with the commitment that David, Matt, and Andrew have to elevating their game. It may have begun as a podcast about a couple of C.S. Lewis fans talking through some of their favorite works, but it quickly became a well-organized professional production featuring guest interviews, after hours on all manner of fascinating Lewis subjects. I appreciated that they truly love to connect with their listeners and that they are consistently, creatively engaging Lewis from so many fascinating angles. One of the latest additions I really enjoyed was Jack's Bookshelf, which naturally made me want to go read more Dorothy L. Sayers and also built a deeper appreciation for Jane Austen, whose corpus my wife and I toured a couple of years ago with joy. It has been a great tool for study and thought-provoking conversation in my own C.S. Lewis group, which has been meeting for nearly as long as the podcast has been around. Thanks for all the love you guys pour into the podcast. It definitely comes through. Can't wait for Paralandra. So there, even with the Brit, I realize I missed one word. Sorry.
You missed two, but it's okay.
Okay.
Other than that, beautifully articulate. Thank you, Andrew.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Well, clearly I'm not, so David gave me the short one. Florida Randy says, C.S. Lewis, Jack to his friends, is a gifted writer. I found Jack first in his book, Mere Christianity. This podcast is a wonderful companion as you read through the book. Highly entertaining and thought-provoking.
Thanks, he says. And Florida Randy, get a hold of me and let me know where you are. I'm around the state often enough. Maybe we should, get together and raise a glass.
Yeah. Well, thanks for those reviews. Listeners, if you have also enjoyed the podcast and have not yet left us a review on iTunes or wherever it is that you listen to us, please do. We'll be reading more next season.
And those reviews and comments really make a difference in our ratings and our egos. So whatever you can do to help.
So let's talk about Season 8. Now, we'd originally intended to start Season 8 in September, but Matt's thoughtless decision to get married means that we're going to actually have to bump it to October. Of course, it was thoughtless. He didn't even have to think about whether or not
That's
he wanted
exactly
to marry
right.
Margaret. But our feeds are not going to be dead until season 8. I'm going to be posting the audio from our 2 live streams from last year's C.S. Lewis Reading Day. And I'm sure we'll be putting stuff up based on our time at the Undiscovered C.S. Lewis Conference in Oregon.
Absolutely.
I still vote for listeners. You got a chance to send this in. I still vote that David put some half pints on there. There's a lot of gold, I think, in those. And maybe it'll actually be a good little teaser to get. There's a lot of people that listen to this that don't go to the YouTube channel because it's just not like something you usually listen to on a drive. But there's just gold on that, I would imagine. I'm one of those people that have not listened to one in 3 years.
Yeah.
That sounds about right.
Well, next season we're going to return to the Ransom trilogy, this time traveling to Paralandra. It's 17 chapters, and we're going to take our time, 1 chapter per episode, so it'll take us quite a few months to get through it. But as we always say, Lewis deserves to be read slowly and carefully. This past season, we've had a few more discussion episodes run long and go over 60 minutes, but by restricting ourselves to a single chapter per episode next season, we should once again be back under 1 hour per episode. We're also going to break up our time on Paralandra a little bit by interviewing a guest on a Paralandra-related subject on the last Thursday of each month. And because we have not yet drunk nor mentioned the name of Lewis's best book, Paralandra, of course, is Venus or Tinadril, and Venus, Tinadril, Paralandra is the old solar name for Ungat, the goddess of love in Till We Have Faces, C.S. Lewis's best book.
James Cuomo seems to agree with you, too.
Jim is right.
You mentioned there that we're going to have a Paralandra-related interview on the last Thursday of every month. Those are not going to be the only interviews next season. We've got some great ones lined up. We're going to be discussing Joy Davidman's book on the 10 Commandments, Smoke on the Mountain, with our representative from Orthodox Judaism, Dr. Yaakov Weinstein. And speaking of Inklings adjacent authors, we'll also be talking to Steve Weidenkopf about another Sheldon Van Auken book, Under the Mercy.
I should finally read that book.
You should.
I'm afraid, though, because it's like, it sounds terrible. I hope he doesn't listen to that. Well, actually, Sheldon's dead.
Sheldon's more alive now than ever he was, but carry on.
Thank you, Andrew.
Wait, is Sheldon still alive?
No, he's alive with God
in the way
heaven.
that we are always, because it is appointed unto man once to die.
That's fair. Good point, guys. Good point. This feels like my David Copperfield moment all over again. Scarred
Wait,
from
Matt
that
with
one.
a literary reference. Cheers.
No. Wow. It wasn't a literary reference when I first did it.
He thought we were talking about the magician.
You weren't a part of this show then. It was not one. It set the stage for the rest of my career on Pints with Jack. I'm afraid to read it because I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be like Dumb and Dumber 2. The first one was so good. I'm afraid the sequel is just not. I really get afraid to read sequels when the first one's so good.
I can assure you this is dumberer.
Dumberer. Have you read it yet, David?
No, I have flicked through it. It looks great.
Yeah. I've read it. It doesn't have the kind of inspiration that Severe Mercy does. Severe Mercy was written, I think, in about 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And it was under the same kind of inspiration that The Messiah was written very quickly. Under the Mercy is more calculated, and it's also about his journey from Protestant Christianity to Catholicism. And so it is, in my opinion, not because of the subject matter, but in my opinion, less inspired.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's still a fair writer, and it's a journey worth examining, but I think that it's more particular. And the fact that we hear very little about Under the Mercy is probably because of the really kind of qualitative differences between that and his really masterpiece of his own writing.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, one other interview that I've got scheduled is with Dr. Simon Horobin, who recently appeared on a Half Pint video with me, and he'll be back to talk about his new book, C.S. Lewis's Oxford, which I have been reading and absolutely loving.
Yeah. Did you see my name in there?
Were you in the acknowledgements?
I bet I was.
Let's just check in real time. No, he specifically says that you didn't help in any way. Yep. There we go. No, your name is there with Dr. Stephen Beebe and Colin Duryea and all the usual culprits.
Simon's a wonderful guy, and I look forward to that interview.
Well, we are back with another audience favorite, Jack's Bookshelf. I will say this was a wonderful edition. I agree.
Hmm.
And we're going to be looking at, oh man, I am stoked for 2 of these, and I've never heard of a third one.
St. Augustine.
Ouch. Oh man. St. Augustine is one of the ones I'm stoked for. Wordsworth, I've never heard of. And T.S. Eliot, I'm actually quite excited because I feel like he's written some great stuff and I hear a lot about him, but I've never read him.
Yeah. Wordsworth is one of Lewis's favorite poets. And in fact, the inspiration for the title of his autobiography, surprised by joy, impatient as the wind, I turned to share the transport, but with whom? Surprised by joy is Wordsworth's sonnet on the loss of his daughter. And it was that sonnet that Lewis used the title of for his own spiritual autobiography about joy and longing and absence. And yeah, Wordsworth was really important to him.
Marie and I are actually reading T.S. Eliot on Saturday mornings over breakfast. We actually read The Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock last week.
I'm so sorry. Do I dare to put a foot upon the stair?
Well, my favorite line thus far has been time for you and time for me, and time yet for 100 indecisions, and for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of a toast and tea.
Well, and time to prepare a face to meet the faces we shall meet.
Oh.
And in fact, when I spoke about Till We Have Faces for MythCon 47 as the keynote, the title of the talk, which is available on Mythlore, is time to prepare a face. And so, yeah, there's great stuff. Anyway,
gentlemen, I'm gonna need to tender my resignation of a co-host of this podcast, because as long as I continue to show up, Mary Margaret will keep listening to this, and you guys keep making me look terrible. Waking up on a Saturday morning reading T.S. Lewis, T.S.
Lewis. T.S. Lewis Carroll. T.S. Lewis Carroll.
You're just making me look so bad.
We are not making you look bad. We are revealing the badness that you inherently carried with you.
No. We are giving you great ideas. I mean, I've mentioned that you should be writing her an engagement sonnet. I'm really looking forward to hearing it by the time of the wedding.
Oh my goodness, I forgot about this. Can we feed these me like 3 weeks before you reveal them on the episodes, so that way I like look like I started doing it before she hears it?
Matt, let me help you, and don't use AI. Let me help you. I'll help you write a sonnet. Seriously, I would love to do that if that would be a gift to you. Let's spend a little time.
She would be. I wrote her engagement like poem, and I do like actually some of the content. So you and I working together to turn that as like a base into a sonnet.
Sure, let's do it. Let's do it. I can easily do that. And I won't flex suggesting that Malcolm Guite wrote my wife and me a wedding sonnet that was an acrostic. Andrew and Kristen were the first letters of all of the lines. And yes, I won't do that flex and assert that was true. But it was.
All right. Well, back to our Batesian rigidity I will impose. So we'll also have a Narnia month as usual. This is news to me. I'm excited to hear what I'm about to read to you guys.
So he clearly read this beforehand. He's just pretending to be disorganized just to keep with the perceived form.
That's exactly right. But since we've now actually I talked about this. Sorry, I'm going off of Bates and rigidity. I was talking about this with Matt in Oxford, because I told him about that one review we got a while back. So he opened my Paralandra, by the way, and he sees I underlined a bunch of stuff. I'm ahead of time. And I'm like, see, I do really prep for these things. I just don't prep like David does. I do it in a different way. And then I pretend like I don't on the episode. And then a person writes in that Matt needs to prep more.
Frankly, like, no one preps like David does.
Well, yes.
But that's why we have a podcast.
Yes. Anyways, back to the scheduled programming. But since we've now finished all the books, we're going to start looking at the adaptations, beginning with, interesting, the BBC adaptation of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Naturally, we'll have Dr. Lazo, Lazo Major, Lazo of the many books. That is so true. Andrew can't write a single book, but his wife can write so many. I mean, how have you not
We've written 90 books between us, okay?
Yes.
Take a pill.
That's a good way to phrase it. I like that. That's like those Twitter things that go around that like Elon Musk and I are going to have to file $12 billion in taxes this year.
What else will we do, Matt?
Yeah. We'll also interview guests on Narnia-related topics. Since the subject of the Inklings and environmentalism has come up on the Slack channel, we'll be talking to Matthew Dickerson about his book Narnia in the Fields of Arble.
Yes, he's also written about Tolkien and the environment, and he's a good source. And before we come to the season finale next year, we'll be wrapping up season 8 with Charles Williams month. Good preparation for when we finally get to that hideous strength in season 10. Serena Higgins will be joined by other guests as we dive into Williams' life, especially all of the weird bits, which is most of his life. Now, no promises, but there's a new book about Charles Williams and C.S. Lewis, and written by an Oxford professor, the Oxford professor of systematic theology.
Friends in Coherence?
Friends in Coherence by Paul S. Fiddes. And Paul Fiddes joined us at the conference in Romania, the Kindred Spirits conference, and I shot him a note with a picture of his live broadcast for the conference. And I said, "Hey, I may be in England later on this year. If I'm in Oxford, can we meet for tea?" And he said, "Oh, I'd love that." So we may reach out to Paul Fiddes and see if he can join us too. No pressure.
Can we meet for some tea, please?
Just a spot.
How was that, mates?
Oh, dear Lord.
So bad.
So glad they didn't strangle you.
I don't know. If they strangled him, he wouldn't be able to do it on this podcast afterwards.
A British murder mystery podcast. There we go.
Oh, man.
Well, I was just going to add that obviously we'll continue with the Half Pint episodes. I'm generally trying to aim at about having one, sometimes 2 episodes a month on the YouTube channel. And just for people that haven't encountered them, they're basically interviews with friends and soon-to-be friends about stuff that's going on here and now in the Lewis world. And I don't have time to schedule it because we have a very heavily scheduled season already. So when I find out that something's happening that people should know about, I invite whoever's organizing it to come on the YouTube channel and to talk to me about it. So we'll continue to have 1 or 2 of those a month. And I think I will go with Matt's suggestion. During our interregnum between the seasons, I'll post the audio of some of the Half Pint episodes so you can get a flavor of the sort of thing that we've been discussing there.
To be blunt, I kind of want to listen to some of these, but
not enough to actually sit down at your computer and hear it.
Well, that is the issue. I don't think I've ever sat at my computer other than if I'm watching some sort of like programming educational video. And I don't have the YouTube app on my phone because that's just a dangerous thing to have on your phone because of the YouTube shorts. And so there's not a medium for me to really listen to them, unfortunately.
So here's an idea, Matt. You and Mary Margaret should spend half of your walk listening to a Half Pints interview and the rest of the walk discussing it.
That's actually a decent idea. I like that. Like we could be cooking breakfast on a Saturday morning and listen to a Half Pint.
Generous of you.
Well, that's actually quite a good idea. Do you know anything else about marriage?
You guys are funny. Are we jumping into concluding thoughts?
Yeah. We do not have time to read mail. I had a whole lot of mail for us to read, but we have meandered into interesting places, and I decided Batesian flexibility was due today. So
let me ask you this, because my heart stops not for like 5 or 10 minutes. Well, actually, it's a little bit longer, but is there any one of these, I'm just scrolling through, that was like phenomenal? Those are really lovely.
All of them.
Well, of course they are, but I see one here from an Ashley Reed that's super long.
Let's do a little Half Pint or let's do an additional, let's give our listeners some fresh content, and then we'll maybe do a mailbag episode. What do you think, David?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to suggest. I think
figured.
We'll either do an audio only or we'll do it for one of the common rooms. But thank you to all of you who sent messages. They were fantastic. It is actually my least favorite thing, preparing this episode and trying to trim everything down and try and work out what we're going to share, because there's so much of it. But having said that, keep going. Keep sending us stuff. It's great.
Let's let's do a full episode, maybe even an hour that we can chop up into 3 20-minute bits or something. I can spare an hour for that. And I would love for our listeners to know that their voices matter so much, because the thing about Lewis is not what David and Matt and I say about him. It's the fact that he keeps resonating with people all around the world and makes a really personal connection. We were talking about this at the conference, that Lewis, when people come to a conference on Lewis, he has already carved out inside of them this kind of space to fill up with affection and goodness. And so people who come to these conferences often find themselves immediately friends. We had one couple who saw Kristen and me at the Lewis event in Navasota in the fall, and they drove from Mississippi to be part of the conference. And so Lewis really, really sparks this profound reaction.
All the way from Mississippi, you say?
Oh, dear Lord, please make him stop. I can't wait till he's married next season so that Mary Margaret can keep a hand on the tether.
Start whipping him into shape.
She condones it.
Oh, dear
It's
Lord.
dangerous.
Yeah, we'll get to her. We'll deal with her next. But let's give full voice, or let's give a broader voice to some of our listeners who are the lifeblood of the show. So I'm sure I'm saying nothing that David hasn't already thought about.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. But since we are now nearing the hour, any final thoughts or anything you'd like to share about your plans for our time off?
We mean like, was this supposed to be recorded before our time off? Because we've already had our time off.
Well, you've had your time off. I've been busy.
Yeah, I was going to say, but we don't have any more time off. We're starting a recording schedule.
We are, but it's only like a couple. We're going to record the very first episode and then chapter 1 of Perelandra, and then we've got a big long break before we start coming back with more regularity.
Well, I guess that's probably because of my plan, which is a honeymoon.
And incidentally, listeners, if you want to do something thematic before you start Perelandra, The Magician's Nephew, the planet, according to Michael Ward, over Magician's Nephew is Venus. And The Magician's Nephew is the last fiction Lewis writes until Till We Have Faces, which is also in many ways about Venus. So if you want kind of a Venusian trinity, you can read Perelandra, Magician's Nephew, Until We Have Faces and start thinking about some of the interesting connections. So
doesn't Perelandra finish with like something about a face? Did I see that in Mystical Perelandra?
probably.
We'll have to find out next season.
Yes, teaser.
Oh, wait, what am I doing? You might have to cut that. I don't know why I just threw that out here as like I guess I didn't really give up much away.
Listeners, Matt has no concluding thoughts.
Yeah.
So we'll pivot to
I have
David,
no thoughts.
and then maybe I'll take the final word.
Well, regarding Patreon, US-based listeners in the top 2 Patreon tiers, so Platinum and Gold, you should have just received your end-of-season thank you gift from us. We very much hope you enjoy it and share pictures of it on social media.
Yes.
And all Patreon supporters will be receiving a Welcome to Season 8 present before the first episode drops. I just wanted to end by saying I'm very much looking forward to having a little bit of a break. But also, I will be appearing on Pints with Chesterton fairly soon.
Nepotism.
Yes, absolutely. To help my wife finish The Everlasting Man, because Grace's schedule gets a little crazy. So the two of them have been going through part 1 of The Everlasting Man, and my wife and I will be going through part 2 together. So if you want to see how we work as a couple, tune into that.
Well, speaking of wives and our betters, I'll just wrap up by saying this, and saying it to myself and to my co-hosts and to all of us who hear. If we continue to love Jesus, nothing much can go wrong with us, and we pray that we may always do so.
Mm-hmm.
I hear the call for final drinks, so thanks to our sound engineers, Taylor and Sarah, our intern, Julia. Thanks to all of our listeners and Patreon supporters, particularly our top-tier supporters, Sarah, Mark, Edgar, Kevin, Mary Margaret, Aldo, Alex, James, Matt, Erica, Joelle, Amanda, Thomas, Bud1, Bud2, Shane K, Paul, Gary, Stephen, Kelly, Chris, John, James, Kate, Peter, David, Angela, and Rowdy. We pray for all of our listeners every single time an episode drops, and we keep a close eye on the Slack channel. If you've enjoyed this episode, please find your copy of Perelandra and get ready for Season 8. And please join us next season,
When we'll continue going further up
And further in.
cheers!
Cheers!
Cheers.